two homeless twin girls approached Johnny Depp in sheer desperation. He had no idea of the heartbreaking truth they carried. But the moment he heard their confession, he was shaken to his core, overwhelmed with emotions beyond words. Stay with us until the end to uncover the incredible truth behind this emotional encounter. You won't want to miss it. As the early morning light filtered through the Venetian blinds of a sterile hospital room, Johnny Depp sat quietly in a padded chair, his arm outstretched as a nurse prepared for the blood donation. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly above, blending with the distant beeps of hospital monitors. His gaze drifted to the window, momentarily lost in thought, his mind weighed down by the endless demands of his career. But here, in this quiet moment, none of that mattered. Here, he was simply a man doing something real, something that could change a life. A thin tube connected Johnny's vein to a half-filled blood bag, its deep red contrasting starkly against the white clinical surroundings. The young nurse, her eyes kind but tired, worked efficiently, glancing at him now and then. "You doing okay, Mr. Depp?" she asked softly. Johnny turned from the window, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Yeah, all good. I've had worse things taken from me." His voice was light, but beneath the humor lay a quiet melancholy. The nurse chuckled, adjusting the blood bag. "Well, this is for a good cause. You're helping save lives today." "Happy to do it," Johnny replied sincerely, watching the bag slowly fill. It was a small act, but one that could mean everything to someone out there. A moment of silence settled between them, comfortable and unspoken. The nurse finally broke it, pressing gently on his arm. "We're almost done here," she said kindly. Johnny leaned back, exhaling slowly, grateful for these few peaceful moments. As the nurse removed the needle and secured his arm with medical tape, he grinned. "Didn't faint, I call that a win." The nurse smiled, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. It's rare to see celebrities donating blood, especially during National Blood Donor Awareness Month. Johnny shrugged, offering a lopsided smirk. "You don't need a red carpet to do the right thing. Everyone's got something to give." The nurse paused, touched by the simplicity of his words, before quietly nodding. As Johnny stepped out into the hospital hallway, the tranquility of the donation room gave way to the gentle hum of hospital life. Nurses moved between patients, soft-soled shoes barely making a sound against the polished floors. The occasional ring of a phone and hushed conversations blended into the background. Pulling out his phone, Johnny noticed messages from his assistant, an important meeting with a film director, a potential comeback role. Normally, it would demand his full attention. But instead, he typed a quick reply, mentioning he had just finished donating blood, and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Stepping outside into the crisp morning air, he inhaled deeply, feeling a strange sense of calm. The sun had risen higher now, casting long shadows across the city streets. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed them, two small figures lingering near an alleyway across the street. Two little girls, no older than 7 or 8. Their clothes were thin and ragged, their frail silhouettes barely standing against the chilly breeze. One of them clutched an old, worn-out bag, its contents a murky brown liquid. Something about them made Johnny stop in his tracks. He had no idea that in the next few moments, his life was about to change forever. Stay with us to find out what happened next. This is a story you won't forget. Don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from today? Just outside the hospital doors, Johnny Depp stood still, his eyes fixed on the two little girls across the street. There was something about them, a strange pull, a curiosity that settled deep in his gut. They weren't just any children. Their fragile frames, their cautious glances at every passing stranger, something wasn't right. After a long moment of hesitation, he made a decision. He was going to cross that street. As he waited for the light to change, his gaze never wavered from them. His steps were careful, measured, not too fast, not too slow. He didn't want to startle them. But as he drew closer, the details became clearer. The hollow cheeks, the identical features marking them as twins, the way their eyes darted around as if expecting danger at any moment. They didn't recognize him. That was both a relief and a heartbreaking reminder of their reality. The older-looking twin noticed him first. Her voice, thin and trembling, barely reached his ears. "Sir, please help." She clutched her sister's hand tightly, her knuckles white from the grip. Johnny stopped a few steps away, keeping his posture relaxed, his voice soft. "Good morning," he said, careful not to sound intimidating. The younger twin gave a timid nod, then blurted out in a rush, "Mister, do you have any spare money, please?" Johnny's brow furrowed slightly. He steadied them for a moment before reaching into his coat pocket. His fingers brushed against a folded bill, and he pulled it out, holding it out to the younger girl. "Here," he said gently. "Get yourselves something warm to eat." She snatched the money quickly, her small fingers clutching it as if it were the most precious thing in the world. Her eyes, wide with gratitude and desperation, locked onto his for a brief second. A second too long for a child to carry that much sorrow. As Johnny stood there, reality settled heavily on his chest. Two little girls, alone on the street. Where were their parents? How had they ended up here? Then he noticed it, the bag. One of the twins clutched it tightly against her chest. It was old, worn out, but what caught Johnny's attention wasn't its appearance. It was the smell. A putrid, unmistakable odor. Not just dirt or grime. Something worse. Something medical. Something dangerous. Before he could ask, a sharp voice cut through the air like a knife. "Girls. What did I say? Get back here." The twins flinched. Their bodies tensed, their faces frozen with fear. Johnny's head turned toward the alley, his eyes adjusting to the shadows. A figure emerged, a thin, hunched woman, her voice strained with authority. "I told you not to wander off," she barked. The girls didn't hesitate. They exchanged a quick, terrified glance before disappearing into the alley, vanishing like ghosts into the shadows. Johnny was left standing on the sidewalk, staring at the empty space where they had just been. A hollow feeling settled in his chest. He should have stopped them. He should have asked more. But they were gone. And now, the only thing left was questions. His foot shifted forward, his body leaning slightly as if to follow, but before he could take a step, movement in the alley stopped him. Several figures emerged. Homeless men and women, their gazes wary, their postures tense. Johnny lowered his head instinctively, subtly adjusting his stance to blend in. But one of them, a man with sunken eyes and a sharp jawline, bumped his shoulder roughly as he passed, muttering a low curse under his breath. Johnny let it go. It was a harsh reminder, this wasn't his world. And as much as he wanted to help, walking into that alley alone, as a recognizable figure, was dangerous. Instead of leaving, he decided to wait. Pulling his sunglasses from his pocket, he slid them on and crossed the street, stepping into a small convenience store. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as he slowly made his way through the aisles, his mind still stuck on the twins. He grabbed a juice and a hot dog, more out of necessity than hunger. After the blood donation, he needed something to replenish his energy. The cashier barely acknowledged him as he paid, the exchange cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the intense encounter he'd just had. As he stepped outside, Johnny found a bench with a clear view of the alley and sat down. His posture was casual, his movements slow. But his eyes never left that dark entrance. Sipping his juice, barely tasting the hot dog, he waited. The city continued its morning rush around him. People passed by, lost in their own worlds. Cars honked. Street vendors called out deals. But Johnny didn't move. He was willing to sit there all day if he had to. Because something told him this wasn't over. Lost in their own routines, the people around them remained oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding in their midst. Johnny had barely taken a quarter of his drink when movement at the alley's entrance caught his attention. The twins had reemerged. Their small figures moved quickly, scanning the street with cautious, darting glances. They had a purpose. Without hesitation, Johnny capped his juice, grabbed the untouched hot dog in its paper bag, and began to follow them, keeping a careful distance. His steps were measured, deliberate, close enough to see where they were headed, but not so close as to startle them. They were going back to the hospital. Johnny's curiosity deepened. Why would two homeless children return to a medical facility? He watched as they bypassed the main entrance and instead approached a back door, where a nurse was already waiting. His pulse quickened. This wasn't a random visit. This was an arrangement. From behind the corner of a nearby building, Johnny watched as the nurse took the brown bag from the twins with practiced discretion, constantly scanning her surroundings as if ensuring they hadn't been followed. The entire exchange was swift, efficient. In return, she handed the girls a new bag, securing it carefully around one twin's neck, along with a small bottle of medication. She hugged them both briefly, whispered something urgent, then ushered them away. Less than a minute. That was all it took. But that minute spoke volumes. Johnny barely had time to process what he had seen before the girls turned to leave. He had to act fast. Moving quickly, he ducked into an alcove just before they passed his way, keeping out of sight. When he looked back toward the nurse, she was already gone. The girls were heading toward the crowded front of the hospital when Johnny made his move. Removing his sunglasses, he stepped into their path, but not aggressively, just enough to catch their attention. The healthier twin recognized him immediately, her eyes widening slightly in surprise. Her sister, however, was locked onto something else. The food in his hands. There was no mistaking the deep hunger in her gaze. Johnny crouched slightly to their level, his voice soft, reassuring. "Hello again," he said gently. "I saw you talking to that nurse. Is everything okay?" The twins exchanged a nervous glance, uncertainty flickering between them. Johnny could see it, the hesitation, the instinct to run. So he led with kindness. Carefully, he extended the paper bag. "You two look like you could use this more than me." For a second, they hesitated. Then the younger twin's eyes flicked to the bottle of juice in his other hand. Noticing her interest, Johnny smiled slightly. "I already drank some, but I can get you a new one later if you'd like." The sick twin shook her head quickly. "We don't mind," she murmured, barely above a whisper. "We find bottles and trash cans all the time. This one's much better." Johnny's stomach twisted at her words. He wanted to go inside and buy them fresh food, clean water, anything better than this. But if he left now, he might lose them again. Making a quick decision, he handed over the bottle. "Here, take this for now. I promise I'll get you a new one later, okay?" The sick twin didn't wait. She gulped down the juice like it was the first drink she'd had in days. Her sister took a bite of the hot dog but, without hesitation, handed the rest to her. That simple action, giving up food so her sister could have more, told Johnny everything he needed to know about them. They had nothing. But they had each other. "Can you tell me your names?" he asked gently. "I'm Johnny." The healthier twin spoke first. "I'm Rose," she said, then gestured to her sister. "This is Rena." Johnny nodded, offering them a warm smile. "Rose and Rena, it's nice to meet you properly." He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "Listen, I want to help. But I need to understand your situation. Can you tell me why you're out here alone? Where are your parents?" The girls exchanged another glance, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Rose looked back at Johnny. Her small face, far too serious for her age, held an exhaustion beyond her years. It's complicated," she admitted, her voice unsteady. "But we need help. Rena needs help." Johnny's concern deepened. As Rose began to speak, the story that unfolded was not one a child should ever have to tell. A story of survival, of hardship, of struggles no 8-year-old should face. "We live with our mom," Rose explained quietly, glancing toward the alley. "There are others there, too. People without homes." Johnny nodded, listening intently. He didn't rush her. He didn't interrupt. "Mom's sick," Rose continued. Her eyes flickered to Rena. "Like her." She pointed to the bag hanging around her sister's neck. Johnny's stomach clenched. His suspicions were right. He met Rose's gaze, his voice gentle but certain. "Is it a colostomy bag?" Both girls blinked at him, not understanding the term. Johnny exhaled slowly, his mind piecing things together. This wasn't just about poverty. This was about survival in its rawest form. And Johnny Depp knew, in that moment, he couldn't walk away. The twins stared at Johnny, clearly unfamiliar with the medical term. He softened his approach. "The bag, it's for waste from your body, right?" Rose nodded slowly. "Yes, that's what the nurse calls it. Mom and Rena need them." Johnny's mind raced, trying to connect the pieces. If both Rena and their mother relied on colostomy bags, they were dealing with something serious, possibly Crohn's disease or another severe condition. "Have you ever heard of Crohn's disease?" he asked gently. Both girls shook their heads. It didn't matter. The diagnosis wasn't as important as the reality they faced. Rena, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. "The nurse gives us new bags and medicine. She's nice, but it's not enough." Rose nodded quickly. "Please," she whispered, her eyes locking onto Johnny's with a mix of hope and desperation. "We need money. Mom says, if we had enough, Rena could be normal like me one day. But it's expensive." Johnny felt a lump form in his throat. There was no hesitation in their words. No manipulation, no agenda, just two children clinging to the fragile hope that their sister, their mother, could have a better life. He wanted to help. But he also knew throwing money at the problem without fully understanding their situation could do more harm than good. "I want to help," he said carefully. "But I think I need to speak with your mother first. Can you take me to her?" The girls exchanged an uncertain glance. After a pause, Rose gave a small nod. "We can show you our tent," she said hesitantly, then added, "but it might be dangerous for you to go inside. People don't always like strangers." Johnny considered that. "Is there a safer time to visit?" Rose thought for a moment. "Actually, right now is the safest. Most people leave to beg on the streets in the evening. Later, they'll start coming back." Johnny nodded. That gave him a window. Just as he was about to respond, Rena tugged on Rose's sleeve, whispering something in her ear. Rose's expression changed slightly, her wide eyes shifting back to Johnny with caution. "There's something else," she murmured. Johnny leaned in slightly. "What is it?" She hesitated before answering. "Uncle Teddy." Johnny felt the tension in her voice. "Who's Uncle Teddy?" he asked, sensing her unease. Rose swallowed. He's kind of the keeper of our camp. He watches people's stuff when they leave." Johnny frowned. The way she said it, it didn't sound like protection. It sounded like control. "He collects money from everyone," Rose added. "For watching their things?" Johnny asked carefully. Rose nodded. Rena, barely audible, whispered, "If they don't pay, he gets mad." Johnny absorbed the information. So, there was a power structure within the homeless community, a man who ruled through intimidation, collecting fees from those who already had nothing. "Where's his tent?" Johnny asked. Rose pointed vaguely ahead. "A few turns before ours. But he was sleeping when we left earlier. He usually sleeps a long time." Johnny exhaled, understanding the delicate situation. "Then we'll be careful. We don't want to wake him up." Sliding his sunglasses back on, he stood up. "Lead the way, girls. I'll follow you." Into the shadows. Crossing the street felt like stepping between two worlds. One moment, Johnny was in the bustling city, people going about their day, oblivious to the hidden struggles just beyond their view. The next, he was following two fragile figures into the shadows. The transition was immediate. The sunlight faded as the alley swallowed them, its walls lined with makeshift shelters, blankets, tarps, and old furniture repurposed into fragile homes. The air was thick with the scent of garbage, damp fabric, and something stale that clung to the back of Johnny's throat. Everywhere, signs of survival were etched into the surroundings: plastic bottles stacked in corners, burned-out candle stubs, old grocery carts packed with belongings. The deeper they went, the more suffocating it became. Johnny matched the girl's movements, careful not to disturb anything underfoot. Each step felt like an intrusion. This was their world, their reality, and he was an outsider in every sense. Rose and Rena moved with quiet confidence, weaving through the labyrinth of debris and tents with the ease of those who had done it 100 times before. Johnny, however, had to carefully navigate through the narrow paths, making sure his footsteps were as silent as possible. They turned a corner, and then another. The tension thickened. Ahead of them was a large, patched-up tent. Rose suddenly pressed a finger to her lips. Johnny followed her gaze. A deep, rumbling snore echoed from within. Uncle Teddy. The tent itself was massive, larger than most of the makeshift shelters around it. The fabric was torn in places, revealing glimpses of movement inside. A pile of clothes and miscellaneous junk lay just outside, along with a few empty liquor bottles. Johnny barely breathed. One wrong step, one misplaced sound, and they would wake him. Rose moved first, creeping past the tent with practiced ease. Rena followed. Johnny held his breath as he took his first step forward. The snoring continued. Another step. Then another. His heart pounded. Just a few more feet. A muffled grunt came from inside the tent. Johnny froze. The girls froze. The snoring wavered, then steadied again. Rose exhaled soundlessly, gesturing for Johnny to keep moving. One last step, and they were past. Only when they were safely around the next turn did Johnny allow himself to breathe properly again. Rose whispered, "We're almost there." Johnny nodded, adjusting his sunglasses. He wasn't sure what he expected to find at their tent. But one thing was certain. He was in this now. And there was no turning back. Moving in tense silence, the girls' faces were masks of concentration, their small bodies rigid with fear. Then, Johnny's phone rang, loud and piercing. He had forgotten to silence it. Panic surged as he fumbled to end the call, his heartbeat thunderous in his chest. The group froze. Uncle Teddy's snoring stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sweat beaded on Johnny's forehead as they all held their breath, waiting. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the snoring resumed. A wave of relief passed through them, though no one dared to move just yet. Johnny mouthed an apology, his face etched with regret. Quickly silencing his phone, they resumed their careful journey, now more aware than ever of the risk they were taking. Finally, they reached a wide, indigo-colored tent. The twins slipped inside to prepare their mother while Johnny waited outside, the harsh reality of their world settling over him. The stench of rot and decay, the scurry of rats, the ever-present tension, it was a stark contrast to his own life. He had stepped into a world most chose to ignore. When the girls reappeared, they beckoned him in. Taking a deep breath, he ducked under the tent flap, ready to meet the woman who had endured so much for her children. Inside, his eyes adjusted to the dim space, cluttered with salvaged items and worn blankets. At the center sat a woman, Mary Ann, the twins' mother. Her weary eyes widened in disbelief as she recognized him. Well, she rasped with a mocking laugh. What brings a Hollywood star to our humble home? Researching a role, Mr. Depp? Johnny's gaze fell to the colostomy bag visible beneath her tattered shirt. The gravity of their situation was undeniable. No role, he replied calmly, crouching to her level. I met your daughters outside the hospital. They need help, and I want to understand what's going on. Mary Ann's defenses went up instantly. This isn't some feel-good publicity stunt, is it? She asked sharply. No cameras waiting outside? Before Johnny could answer, the twins rushed to his defense. "He's nice, Mom," Rose insisted. "He gave us food and money." "And juice," Rena added softly. Johnny nodded. "I promise, this is private. No cameras, no publicity. I just want to help." Marianne studied him, suspicion flickering in her tired eyes. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why do you care about us?" Johnny's answer was simple. No child should have to live like this, especially not one with a serious medical condition. I have the means to help. And I want to. Her tough exterior cracked, just slightly. She exhaled deeply, then murmured, "It wasn't always like this." As she spoke, Johnny listened. She told him about her husband, once supportive but eventually worn down by their daughter's medical struggles. One night, he simply packed a bag and left, locking them out of their own home. 5 years of homelessness followed. "My condition got worse," Marianne admitted, gesturing to her colostomy bag. "The lack of hygiene, the stress, it takes a toll." She looked at Rena with fierce determination. "But my daughter, she still has a chance. If we can afford the right treatment, she might live a normal life." Johnny didn't hesitate. "I'll cover everything, her treatment, the surgery, yours too," he said firmly. "I have connections at the hospital who can help." Hope flickered in Marianne's eyes, but she remained cautious. "If we do this, we have to leave completely," she warned. "If people find out we're getting help, we'll be targets." Johnny nodded. "I understand. I'll find a way to get you out safely." Excited, Rose chimed in, "Mom, remember the nurse at the hospital? The one who helps us with the bags? Maybe she can help, too." Johnny smiled. "I saw her. She seems to care. That could be useful." As they discussed their next steps, for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of hope. Johnny checked the time. "The others will be back soon, won't they?" he asked. Marianne nodded. "And Uncle Teddy is still asleep. If we're leaving, now is our best chance." Johnny didn't hesitate. "Let's go." With practiced efficiency, they packed. Their entire lives fit into a few plastic bags, some clothes, toiletries, a small photo album that Marianne clutched tightly. "Can you check if the coast is clear?" Rose asked. Johnny slipped out, moving toward Uncle Teddy's tent. The rhythmic snoring still filled the alley. He exhaled in relief and returned to the family, giving them a thumbs up. They moved swiftly. Every step past Uncle Teddy's tent was agonizingly slow, the weight of years of fear pressing down on them. But they made it. Emerging from the alley into the bright sunlight, Johnny felt an immense relief. Without pausing, they headed for the hospital. Inside, Johnny approached the reception desk. "I need to speak with Dr. Miracle. Urgently." The nurse, recognizing him despite his attempt at discretion, made the call. Within minutes, they were ushered into an empty consultation room. Dr. Miracle arrived, his eyebrows raising in surprise. "Johnny," he said. "What's going on?" Johnny explained everything. The doctor's expression turned serious as he examined Rena and Marianne. "Rena's case is promising," he said finally. "We need tests, but she might qualify for a reversal surgery. If successful, she could live without the colostomy bag." He turned to Marianne, his expression more somber. "Your condition. I'm afraid it's permanent. But with treatment, we can improve your quality of life." Johnny stepped forward. "I'll cover all the expenses." Dr. Miracle nodded. "I thought you might say that. Let's start with the tests." As the family prepared, Johnny's phone buzzed. Missed calls. Urgent texts. His agent. The director. "Where are you? This role could have been your comeback." "The director is furious." Johnny stared at the screen. Then, without replying, he pocketed his phone. Marianne, noticing, asked, "Is everything okay?" Johnny smiled. Everything's fine. As Rena underwent tests, Johnny made calls, not to his agent, but to contacts and social services. He arranged for a shelter that specialized in medical cases. When he told the family, the relief in their eyes was overwhelming. Impulsively, the twins hugged him, their usual wariness forgotten. Marianne wiped her eyes. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Johnny said softly. "Just focus on getting better." As he watched the family embrace, he realized something. This morning, he had walked into a hospital for a routine blood donation. Now, he had found a new purpose. Maybe, just maybe, helping this family meant more than any movie role ever could.